Well, welcome back, everybody. Week 4 of Ephesians. We hope you guys are doing well in your groups and that you've had some really good interactions up until now. As Trey said earlier today, welcome to Ephesians chapter 3. We're going to cover the whole chapter.
So buckle up and here we go.
Yep. We just want to remind you, your group discussion guide is on page 52. And remember, connect, grow, and engage. Those are the big buckets that you want to think about as you're planning. And just reminding people about, hey, how'd you do on your application? How'd you do on some of the Engage tools that we talked about last week? Always a great way to start your group.
Well, let's jump in on observation as we jump into Ephesians 3. As you guys kind of look at pages 25 and 46 and 47 in your packet on that kind of the observation spread, we get to introduce one of my favorite skills in Bible study. So we all have our pet skills, our pet favorites. The skill of boxing connecting words is really one of my favorites. So Caroline really, I think, in the last couple of videos has really kind of, I think, emphasized kind of flow of thought, tracing Paul's flow of thought. How is he moving from chapter 1 to chapter 2? Well, really, it's the skill of boxing connecting words that really ends up being kind of a signpost, kind of a flag for you to kind of see Paul's movement and his flow of thought kind of move and course through this chapter. And so even in Ephesians 3, even kind of these two main sections of this chapter, verses 1 to verse 13 and then verses 14 to verse 21, both of these big sections begin with one of the key connecting phrases, "for this reason." Mm-hmm. It's kind of hearkening you back to, well, what was the reason that was the primary idea before this section? That's kind of the cause or the trigger for the section that we're going to get into. And so we gave you 4 different kind of connecting words you can look for: comparison, contrast, purpose, and result. And we'll give you another set of 4 as we get to next week, kind of slowing down and giving you a chance to kind of focus on this particularly important skill.
Yeah, so good. You might take time in your group to ask, hey, what are those that you saw? Even go over them together as you do your observations. So combining the skill with getting the observations is a really great thing to do this week.
In terms of big ideas and big themes, again, there's a lot to cover here in this chapter. But we particularly liked question 2. That it was thinking through not just the big themes that are here in this section, but really what are some of the themes that we're seeing here that we've been seeing already. And so as we kind of jumped into that, what did you see for question 2 in terms of themes or ideas that are showing back up here?
Yeah, so there are quite a few. I saw heaven and earth, rulers and authority, ages, mystery. Once again, looking for repeated words over and over. You see them even in this section. Eternal purpose, revelation, power, grace. There's so many big themes that Paul repeats in this section.
If you remember the end of chapter 2, we talked about kind of that Jew and Gentile newfound and new experienced equality. Well, here in verse 6 of chapter 3, you get this idea of fellow heirs, fellow members, fellow partakers of the promise. And so we're going to get back to that same idea, but that repetition of fellow, again, highlighting the equality of this new community that we saw kind of established and talked about at the end of chapter 2. Yeah. So that kind of sets the stage to kind of jump into interpretation and looking at kind of what's going on here in this section. Incredibly rich section, a lot of fun.
Yeah, very good. So as you turn over to the interpretation, you'll notice that the skill this week is studying cross-references. This can be a skill that we sort of take for granted if we've been in Bible study for a while. And so we just, again, knowing your group, you might want to take a moment and just help a newer person really understand what you're talking about. So a lot of Bibles actually have cross-references listed in the margins, and so you could point that out and in the Bibles that you have in front of you, or there's the online tool through NetBible that you could talk about as well. So as we transition to question 1, you'll see that we actually gave you 2 big sections that are cross-references to Paul himself. So when I was thinking about this section, I was like, okay, Paul, this is where he's talking about himself for the first time in this letter. What all these principles that he's been saying, the blessings, the amazing implications of the gospel, he's kind of shining the light on himself in this first section. And so these cross-references actually give you a little bit of his background, again, for people who may not know Paul and his story that well. So you might want to talk about that in your group. So the question here is, why does Paul say that he was a prisoner for the sake of the Gentiles? What do you think, Trey?
Yeah, I think one of the things, especially using that cross-reference in Acts chapter 9, is it's not just that he's been, in a sense, that we're seeing his calling laid out, that he's been appointed as a preacher to the Gentiles with this gospel that they didn't have the same access to prior. But also, I think what's really important, thinking with him as a prisoner, is that he was appointed not just to proclaim the gospel, but also to suffer. This isn't an easy job, that thinking through even kind of in parallel to the Old Testament prophets, that they were often proclaimers of truth, but it was often in suffering and in hardship and in rejection.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important to realize, too, that Paul and the Ephesians were in this Greco-Roman honor-shame culture. And so as a prisoner, that is a huge shame. So honor was almost the currency of the Roman culture. So it's like money or wealth is in our modern culture. So if you have a lot of it, if you have a lot of honor, you have access, you have power, you have people listening to you, your reputation is good. But if you're a prisoner, your honor has gone way down and your shame has gone way up. So as you talk about question 1, you might even refer back to verse 13, where it says, "Therefore, I ask you not to become discouraged about my tribulations, since they are for your glory." So what Paul's doing is he's flip-flopping that in the kingdom of Jesus, there's an opposite value. So when you suffer loss or incur shame for the gospel, that's actually for your honor. So it's pretty powerful if you want to spend time on that.
I think one of the big thrusts of this first half of chapter 3, really we're trying to cover with multiple kind of parts to the question in the second question in the interpretive section. So describe the mystery that is being revealed here. We give you a couple other cross-references. So you're going to see, again, almost every question we give you in the interpretive section, almost any lesson is going to involve cross-references. We're often going to say, see also.
Right.
And so that's our cue, that we're giving you a cross-reference to give you another place that you can go to understand better what we're talking about, even within this passage. So we almost so assume it because we build it in to almost every question. But what is this mystery? I think it's fascinating as you think about the themes and the word choices that are going through the section. Is there's a mystery that was being held back prior, but now it's been revealed, it's been made known, that we are enlightening people. So you get these words that are kind of synonyms for something that was hidden and unknown, and now has been revealed and made known to others. And so what is it that's being made known? Particularly, it's the gospel of Jesus, that what Jesus has done, but particularly the mystery is that it's now for the Gentiles. Yeah. That the Gentiles, as Paul had described in chapter 2, that were excluded from the commonwealth of Israel, strangers to the promises, far away, have been brought near because of the gospel that Paul is now proclaiming to the Gentiles. The most interesting thing to me as you kind of walk through this section is really the third kind of sub-question to number 2. What are the cosmic implications of this mystery? We gave you, again, a couple cross-references to earlier in chapter 1 of Ephesians, but also to 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 10 and 12. And what I love about this idea here is that you're getting, in a sense, the curtains pulled back, and we get a glimpse into the heavenly realm, and we see that the mystery wasn't just not made known to the Gentiles. It's not just that we are all experiencing for the first time what's been revealed, but the angelic realm itself has been looking on in anticipation, like it's a drama unfolding, not knowing what was going to happen. And so we see from 1 Peter 1, we see from Ephesians 1 that all of these heavenly realms, all these angels and dominions have been looking to see how this is going to unfold, and they're seeing it for the first time too. Yeah. This is a mystery to them that is being revealed. And so you see it in a sense in even the broader wisdom, the manifold wisdom of God, that he is holding together this drama that is being unfolded in his timing, in his way, that even the angels at the time didn't know.
Yeah. All the powers, really, both the evil and the good heavenly realms, are looking on and seeing this amazing manifold wisdom of God being revealed. That word revealed is actually apocalypse. And so it's a startling revelation. Okay, so moving on to question 3. This one we were trying to get at a little bit as a summary. It's the beginning of the second section where it's really Paul going back to prayer. I love how he just weaves prayer into what he's thinking about and what he wants people to know. Prayer is just like right there, intertwined in it. And so you might spend some time talking about, how does that idea of one new people of God with God as the Father, what does that imply, and how does that affect the readers? And then how can that inform our prayers as well? It's amazing to me that Paul is drawing in that family imagery again, which then, as we transition to the rest of the book, will become even more explicit.
I love question 4. It kind of gets us into some of the specifics of Paul's prayer. So highlighting kind of this repeated idea that Carolyn mentioned about just the power of God, that the power of God is one of the main themes and threads of what Paul's praying for the people to experience, to realize, and to walk in. And so we gave you a series of cross references again, trying to help us understand what is this power that he's praying for? What is this power that he's talking about? And really what I want to do for you is give you a different cross-reference than we even gave you. And I want to give you the cross-reference that takes us to Ezekiel chapter 36, particularly verses 26 and 27, because what we're going to find here in Ezekiel 26 is what we refer to as the New Covenant. And the New Covenant was a set of promises that was originally given to the nation of Israel and the house of Judah. And in those promises, we're going to see for the first time part of what Paul's praying for the Ephesians a millennia later. Notice what it says in Ezekiel 36, verses 26 to 27. We find this. It says, "Moreover, I will give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit within you. And I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you, and I will cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will be careful to observe my ordinances." It's interesting if you think about Israel's history at the time that Ezekiel 36 was proclaimed, they were actually in exile. They were being punished for not obeying the law, not doing what they were required to do. And so what God is doing in this moment is he's coming to them and said, hey, I know that you were clear with what I wanted you to do, but you didn't do it. And so, and because of that, what I want to do now is do something that I haven't done prior, which is put my spirit within you in such a way that you now begin to have a desire and an ability to obey what I've called you to do. And so as we get into the church age, what we begin to see is that Christ's death not only did away with the law, like we talked about last week, but it also inaugurated, it commissioned, it set forth in motion those promises that were given to the nation back in Ezekiel 36. And so Paul is praying for the power that they now have within them because of the Spirit that's been given to them, which changes the game. If you think about the Old Testament and the law, it was a whole set of ordinances and commandments that they didn't have the heart to actually obey or the ability, so they just kept coming up short. But now as Jew and Gentile are brought together into a new community, this new community has all of these blessings that Jesus has unfolded to them that we looked at in Ephesians 1. And particularly what we're highlighting now is particularly this power that's been granted to them through the Spirit of God that is indwelling inside of them so they can obey and walk with God in a way that the nation of Israel never could do.
Yeah, so good, Trey. And that, really, if you focus on the empowerment of the Spirit, sets you up to really handle question number 5. What is it about this prayer right here at the end of the chapter that acts as a bridge between all these concepts, these amazing, profound things, to the actual boots on the ground? How do we live it out in our lives? And we would say that it's that infilling of the Spirit, the experiential knowledge and the power through the Spirit that will impact our conduct that we'll look at.
And I love that if you think about the way the book of Ephesians is kind of laid out. The first 3 chapters are all about doctrine and truth. The next 3 chapters, as we get in the following weeks, are going to be about conduct. Mm-hmm. How therefore do we live? How do we walk in a manner worthy of him who's called us and granted us all these blessings? And so before we get to all of these commands and all this stuff about conduct and how we're to live in a different way, Paul is praying again for this church and hoping and praying that they have a remembrance of and an experience of a set of resources and power within them to go about and do all that he's about to call them to. Yeah. And it kind of sets up one of the themes I think is really, really important, even as we think about application, as we think about how do we live, how do we change our lives, that it's always, what we always see throughout the scriptures is that resources always seem to precede responsibilities. Long before Paul or Jesus will highlight for us what we're to go and do, we're often going to get a reminder of the resources that we've been given to be able to go and do the thing that God's called us to.
Yeah, totally. All right, then moving to application, as usual, we have a couple of reflection questions. The first one is about prayer. You may have already covered that in previous weeks when we talked about prayer. So we were going to suggest that maybe focusing on question 2 might be something you want to do this week. And it asks what the extent to which Paul suffered for his calling to preach the gospel motivates us to follow in his example. And as we talked about, we often, as we're empowered through the Spirit to stretch beyond what we may feel comfortable doing. And so that would be a great time to talk about with your group as you've been praying for people from your Every Neighbor map, for people that are around you who may not know Jesus. What would it take through the power of the Spirit to just take that next step to start a spiritual conversation? That is the Engage tool again this week. So if you didn't have time to talk about it, you thinking about Paul and his life and what he suffered and his mission and calling, how could that motivate us with these tools and the power that we have through the Spirit? So we think that could be a really great conversation moment in your group.
Carolyn started off kind of reminding us of this connect, grow, engage kind of emphasis. And so part of what we're doing with these skills at the end of the study each week is highlighting some skills and not just how we observe the Bible, interpret the Bible, but also how we engage the world. And so starting a spiritual conversation kind of puts us back into the category of what we see Paul doing, a calling to preach the gospel. How do we go therefore and live in a similar way? I want to give you guys some skills that kind of begin to move you along the way, and we'll continue to kind of build that as we go this semester. We're halfway through the book. It's been really rich. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope your groups are enjoying it. And we look forward to cranking through the second half of it with you in the coming weeks.